Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 takes our heroes through time for a story set in feudal Japan. They must rescue April, find their way home, and somehow survive in a world with no pizza in sight. Let's see if Turtles 3 lives down to its less than stellar reputation. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
You were expecting maybe the Addams family?
I knew that was going to be the line. I knew that's the one you were going to pick. As soon as he said it, I went, that is the line David's using. You're so predictable. You figured it out
faster than me. I was sitting debating it for like 10 minutes.
Oh, it was the obvious choice. Welcome everyone, this is a movie podcast, and we are working through the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. We're doing all the live action movies now. We're doing two of the animated movies, including the new one later in the year. This is the third of the 90s trilogy. It is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, and we'll get into it. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. The premise of this one's a bit wackier. The Turtles get swapped with some feudal Japan era characters and travel
Samurai.
through time. Yes. And as does April, and they're in the early 1600s and try to find their way back home, whilst also helping with the locals in it's not quite Seven Samurai-esque, but in the sense that there's like a village in trouble and there's an evil person and they're going to help, blah, blah, blah. You get the gist of it probably from just thinking about it for 2 seconds. So that's what the premise is. This one has a reputation. Not that people consider the second one high art or anything, but I think anyone who grew up in the 90s and talks about these movies, they tend to talk about the third one with a little bit more disdain, and it tends to come up, whenever there's this sort of like, the third movies usually suck, right? Most movies fall apart when you get to the third entry. This is often brought up as one of the prime examples. So I'll be very curious to see, from your perspective, given that you had never seen any of these movies before this series of working through them, to see how you feel. But let's find out. David, what did you think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3?
Well, I don't think there's any way to say this besides just saying it. I think I might have liked it more than number 2. I know. I feel like I'm about to be blasted for that opinion. But
spicy.
I recognize the plot is far more generic. I recognize that the animatronics, they are no longer apparently being done by the Henson Company. They were taken over by a different. And dear Lord, they did something.
Do you know the thing is, the opening of the movie, when you see them just dancing, it looks fine because they're not talking. So you're like, oh, the suits still look good, look like the last movie. And then they start talking, and it just plummets. So you're like, oh no, what's wrong with their mouths?
So I recognize that there are obvious downsides to this movie, but I think that in spite of the Turtles, I enjoyed the plot more in this movie than I did the plot of the last movie. Because the last movie, as we said, it was pretty meandering. It didn't really have much of a focus on what it wanted to do. It had like 4 or 5 different things going on. This one felt a lot tighter, and every time that they wanted to do an offshoot for characterization, it still felt related to the central plot rather than something else entirely. So I do think that I enjoyed this ever so slightly more in a viewing experience than the last one.
Very interesting. This is all very, very fascinating. We're going to dig into this. I can kind of see some of your points there and understand why maybe on a sort of objective level a few things are better. But the plot being as generic as it is really is a bit of a hindrance for me. It always was when I was a kid, because it always just kind of feels like you've got this really generic villain and the actor's like chewing scenery every time he talks, and you've got this they do use like a lot of bits of the cues from the last movies. There's less of them this time, but they're still in the music. But there's this particular cue for the villain that plays like 50 million times over the course of this movie, and it's the most generic. Like, the composer sat down at a keyboard and did like a little synth thing with 4 notes, and it plays constantly throughout this film. Anytime anything evil happens, like
Yeah.
whatever.
I guess after a while I just blocked it out. I was like, oh, the villain must be around. There he is. All right, moving on.
Yeah, I suppose you're just a big fan of Wet Willies, and that's why you like this one so much.
Oh, absolutely. It's my favorite form of torture. But no, the one line that you said there was the villain choose scenery. You say that, but my mind only goes back to the second movie of their babies. And is it really chewing the scenery any more than Shredder did in the second movie?
At least he's still Shredder. This guy's like generous Englishman, right? Like the scene that always sticks out to, because he's kind of chewing the scenery and villainous this first time you see him. But there's a scene where he meets April for the first time, and he's sort of like calling her bluff because she's trying to pretend that she's got magic powers because she's from the future, and he does this thing where he kind of snaps her and shouts at her like mid sentence.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, oh god. I'd forgotten about this, but it all came flooding back like in a moment, because despite the fact that this movie sucks, like I saw it a lot as a kid, because when you're a kid you rewatch all the movies you've got over and over again, regardless of how good or bad they are, and it came flooding back, and I'm like, oh yeah, this guy, this, and I just and there's other things I think have always bothered me about it, and again, so I'm going, this is less of a film critique thing and more as my childhood disappointment with the movie is, it feels like Casey Jones is he's just there for comic relief in the background. He's so separate from everything else. It feels weird to me, again, watching it now, that other than just sitting next to each other in one scene towards the end, Casey and April never share any time together, so they never reference the fact that, hey, we kind of became a couple at the end of the first movie, but we're never going to talk about it or address it in any way, shape, or form. So that's there. Something that's more of an adult complaint than a kid complaint is that this one feels like really heavy on the pop culture references. I mean, you opened with the Addams Family reference. Yeah. There's a Wayne's World reference at one point where they start going schwing because April's showing her legs up.
Okay, if we're just going to mention the schwing thing, like, I've seen Wayne's World. I know what schwing means.
Yeah.
Why is that in this kid's film?
Because they assume the kids just won't understand it, and that's okay.
Okay.
They get away with it because kids won't understand.
I guess. But I mean, all I imagine then is some kid who doesn't know what it means. He sees the turtles do it, and he's like, Mom, swing! And it's like, oh, Billy, no.
But the parent will only know that after seeing Wayne's World. Because it's very specific to Wayne's World. It's not like a general...
I guess.
...thing,
So I guess it's him running up to the cool uncle, being like, hey, Uncle Bob, swing! And Bob's like, what? Billy.
This is no different than 10-year-old me saying suck it to everyone and doing crotch chops because of wrestling.
I still think that's not good. That's not... You're saying that as if it's like, yeah, that was a normal thing. No.
It was a normal thing. Trust me, kids the 1998 to 2000 period, a lot of them got in trouble at school for saying suck it.
I mean, yeah, I assume so. This was also the era of Bart Simpson.
That is true.
So I recognize that we did not have the best influences, but I feel like Turtle should be safe from that.
Yeah. Funny you bring up Bart, because Bart was actually referenced heavily in the last movie. We never brought it up. They were holding a glass with Bart Simpson on it for like an extended period of time. No Bart references in this, but references to a lot of other things. Addams Family might feel like an old reference, but the new movie, the 90s movies, would have been new at the time. The first one would have been out, and the second one would have been out maybe the same year as this, I want to say. So,
roundabout.
So that would be pretty contemporary at the time.
Yeah, there was other references to, let's see here. Obviously, you said Wayne's World. There was a Quantum Leap reference.
Oh, I don't know if I caught that.
It was just when they jumped into when they time traveled. He was talk about your quantum leap. They referenced Star Trek. They referenced Hawaii of Elvis. They referenced, strangely enough, especially for this show, Clint Eastwood and I think it was Sudden Impact.
Do you know the thing is? The Clint Eastwood reference, right? Because obviously in the past, it's when Mikey sees the villain for the first time, because he's like an English guy on a horse and he's got a hat on. He's not quite a cowboy, but Mikey's comparing him to a cowboy. And he calls him Clint Eastwood. Or he goes, Clint Eastwood? Nah. I feel like that's a reference more to Back to the Future 3 than it is to Clint Eastwood himself. As strange as that sounds. Because Back to the Future 3 was out in 1990, right? So it's quite new. And a big part of that movie is that Marty calls himself Clint Eastwood because no one in that time period will get that it's who that is.
Right.
So he tries to get away with it. And
I'm going to counter with that of later on in the movie, the bad guy pulls a gun and Leo says, "Go ahead, punk, make my day."
It can be a reference to both, but I do think the fact that Back to the Future 3 is the big time travel movie that just came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I could see it.
I think there's a little intentional thing there. But yeah, it's really heavy on the references.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there was numerous others that I...
The only other one I caught, and I actually had to see it, is at one point Michelangelo goes into a burning building to save someone. And
I got this one. That's a backdraft reference.
Yeah, and he says, "Kurt Russell, eat your heart out." And I was like, wow, I'm sure that was really contemporary at the time, but nowadays, what? Yeah,
again, Kurt Russell, backdraft, that would have been about 91, 90 maybe. So very very recent when this movie came out.
Right.
So there's a lot of that. I just happen to know what backdraft is, so I got that reference. Yeah, so very reference heavy, which, the humor, like, in some ways it's even cartoonier than the second one.
It is, but I think what was holding it back in the second one, as we spent a long time on, was they purposely cut down on the violence. They made it so it was all cartoon violence the whole time. And while they did have a cartoony humor in this one, they at least had normal violence. And yes, it had like some sound effects to it, and they were doing like stupid pranks and stuff in the middle of the fight, but they still... Mikey swung his nunchucks.
He did. That did indeed happen during this movie. They all at least kind of used their weapons, although never that much. They'll hold them, they'll swing them a little bit.
Yeah, they never use them fatally, as they never really have, but...
I mean, there's a couple of okay moments with the weapons. Raph, like, deflects an arrow at one point, or, it stops an arrow from being fired at one point with his sai, and, there's a couple of them. I think the fights in this, well, they are better, I think, technically than the second movie, in that they actually feel like there's fighting happening, so that's a plus. They still completely lack any sort of sense of, like, threat that the first movie had when the foot were attacking them, because that felt quite dark. It felt like, there's actual danger here. In this, like, it almost became kind of comical. Every time there was a fight, there was just, like, legions of more, like, samurai to come out of a door to fight them.
Right.
That happened multiple times in this.
Yeah, so. For me, it was the Power Rangering, where it was they punch a guy in the stomach, and he's not dead, he's not unconscious, but he has to stay away from the fight going, oh, until it's time for him to attack again.
Yep, that's fair. On the cast, we have Corey Feldman back as Donatello, interestingly.
Yeah.
We have yet another actor as Raph. Leonardo and Mikey are the same actors. I never actually checked this one, but it sounds like a different Splinter. Splinter sounded a bit...
I think so.
Yeah, he was a bit more generic sounding to me in this one. We have Elias Koteas back as Casey Jones, and also played a character in the past, which I guess is meant to be his ancestor. They never really...
Yeah, that's one... When we get to the plot, that's one trivia thing that I want to see your opinion on in terms of ancestor.
Interesting. We do have the actress who played April in the second movie back for this one, so... Cool. Stuart Wilson plays the villain Walker, who is this Englishman who is trying to sell his guns and cannons to the the local Japanese like lord who's in charge, and he's a big part of the plot. Yeah, he's a big part of the plot as well, because his son, the prince or whatever you want to call him, he's in love with the head of the rebels, and she's a big part of the plot as well. There's a lot of things going on here that we'll get into in the plot, but we have all these characters kind of around, but that's basically everyone who's prominent and important. I will say, I one thing I do appreciate about watching this again after having watched the other two is that this one, if anything, Mikey gets the most in terms of character focus.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, there's a little bit of Raph, but for the most part, it is Mikey's story by the time you hit the second to third act.
And given that the last one was mostly Donnie with a bit of Raph, and the first one was mostly Raph with a bit of Leo, that's actually kind of a nice spread amongst the Turtles.
I feel like if there was a fourth, it would have been the Leo movie, but...
Sadly, this one did not make as much money, and I can't blame the people of 1993 for not going out to see it. Man, 1993, what a year.
That's when I was born.
I mean, you were born. Turtles 3, Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
So many.
It's really just the best of everything all at once.
Yeah. But I appreciate that it tried to give Mickey some focus. And you've got just the general hijinks of, when they go back to the past, a bunch of, it's just like the honor guard for the Lord are all transported. There's always someone that swaps with the people traveling back. So you get Casey and Splinter babysitting some Japanese men from the 1600s in present day. And it's really just a series of jokes about, hey, look at a TV, oh, look at hockey, look at these things from the modern world you don't understand.
Yeah, both the plots in this movie are essentially just fish out of water. But then the turtles eventually get accustomed and they're like, okay, we'll deal with whatever the plot is here in ancient Japan. But then whenever we cut back to modern times, they just keep going with the fish out of water plot. Where they're like, hey, check out what hockey means. And they're like, oh.
Yeah, it's just comedy, which is fine. Like, it's the B plot. Like,
I mean, you say that. Are you not disappointed that Casey did not get more violence?
No, I am. Like, that's one of the first things I said, is that Casey is a fun character, and it's a shame that, it's cool he's back after not being in the second one. We had to deal with Kino in the last one. We get Casey back, and, like, the only time he really does anything is when he tries to play hockey with them, and that's just him reacting to what they do. He doesn't really actually do anything.
Yeah.
And I like Elias Koteas as an actor. It really feels like he was phoning this in, because it's kind of a nothing, thankless role.
See, yes, I agree for the Casey side of things, but he double billed in this movie, and I feel like him playing the old-timey ancestor version, he actually did put the effort into.
I mean, that's fair, although I would argue that his attempt at an English accent was a little lackluster, shall we say.
Accents notwithstanding, I can't help that.
It's like he's really trying to do an accent, but every so often there'd be a line where you just like, you don't even try that line. That line was just in your normal accent, dude. We did. So,
which that is one thing in this movie that they did like a half-hearted attempt at, where they explained, these people in Japan, they know English because at this point there was already a trading route with the English, so they had to, they learned the language or whatever. And I'm willing to accept that for a while, but then we get introduced to
children.
Mitsu. Yeah, children and Mitsu. The children who just are straight up just talking like, oh, hey, how's it going? I'm like, all right, kid, sure.
There's a scene where a child is yelling for help because there's a fire. And I'm like, why are you yelling in English? Surely you would be in your own language if you're in like danger and you're panicking.
But even ignoring that, the one that got me the most, because those are kids. I'm willing to write off a lot for the fact that they're kids. But the fact that Mitsu, our female lead, barring April more or less, is not even trying to put on any sort of Japanese accent. She's just American, just talking with what I consider to be no accent, but clearly is just an American accent.
Yeah.
In the 1600s, before America was a thing.
It's weird when Americans say that, because even America has a lot of different accents that you kind of have to notice. It's like, if you go to Minnesota, you're going to notice they're all speaking in a funny voice. Come on.
Yes, I understand. And there's Southern and there's, all that extra stuff. However, there is just sort of the generic. The one that you always see in like sitcoms and stuff when it's just a normal character.
Is this what you consider yourself to have?
Oh, no, I'm deep south. Can't you hear my drawl?
Well, actually, I have generic American.
Yep. Hello, I would like to order 1 cheeseburger. There you go.
I am Microsoft Sam. I would like to order a cheeseburger.
Yeah. All of America based their accents off Microsoft Sam. That's why we went such a boom in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean... Joe, there is differences though. Like, even just like meeting some Americans that I know for the first time last year in person, is that all of a sudden they sounded different from what I hear on Skype. So there is a genuine difference to hearing an accent in person and what you hear on a recording. I guess it's similar to when you hear your own voice and you go, "That's what I sound like." And I think it isn't really that you sound like that. It's that that's what your recorded voice sounds like. In the same way that hearing someone else recorded sounds different whenever you hear them in real life. Because I thought that about both especially Tara, but Tim even, like, there was It's like, you sound more American than normal.
Okay, but see, that's exactly what I'm saying. What does that mean?
It means a thicker American accent. There isn't an accent. You may deny there's one, but there's one.
No, but I'm saying, I said you would see it as an American accent. That's what I'm saying. But it's not South. It's not Minnesota. It's just the generic one that America is represented as.
Okay, sure, but
and that's what this Japanese woman in the 1600s had in this movie.
I'm not debating that's what I'm just saying that that's still an accent. It's not no accent.
Fair, yes. I'm not arguing that either. I just said from my perspective, it's not an accent.
Oh dear. You say it's not like I look at other Scottish people and go, "You don't have an accent." Of course they do. I hear a Scottish accent.
Everyone in Scotland has a Scottish accent, but that's because they're not America. We are the center of the world.
Isn't the UK the center of the world, like in terms of actual?
You gave up your empire.
Like in terms of how the map's laid out, and like I'm sure there's something to this. There's actually geographically the center.
The prime meridian.
Yeah,
is close by.
Something like that. I don't know. Not that I give a shit. This is more about taking it from you than actually having it.
I was gonna say, you just want me to be all embarrassed that I said something that's American centric.
Yes.
Anyway, so there was a Turtles movie.
I guess we just get into the spoilers. I don't know if I have much more to say without diving into what the movie's going.
The only things I want to bring up in terms of before spoilers are, this movie apparently is the only movie out of the trilogy that did not have a theme song written for it. Okay. And as such, we talked about last movie that the soundtrack was like a real focus for them, something they were trying to push hard. I'm wondering what caused the flip, because clearly the ninja rap sold platinum. There's no way it didn't. So why did they all of a sudden in this movie say, nah, we don't really need any extra music?
That's a good question, because I would have suggested that, yeah, maybe the last soundtrack didn't sell as well, so they didn't bother this time, but, I mean, but I don't know. Like, if the Ninja Rap did well, if the soundtrack for Turtles 2 did reasonably well.
I don't know that it did, but I can't imagine that Vanilla Ice would put out a bomb. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I would have to assume it underperformed, and that's why they didn't bother this time, but, I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, yeah, it's not that much time later. You know, Turtles 2 was rushed out after Turtles 1. This is 2 years after Turtles 2. So, you know, we're only 3 years removed from the first movie. Like in time, not much has changed. Like, this is actually kind of absurd how quickly these 3 movies came out. When you think about, you know, modern sequels and how long it is between some of them. Yeah. You know, this is a very quick turnaround. So I don't know, maybe it's just a simple case of they had a smaller budget, and a smaller budget means not paying some big artist to write a song for you. You know, maybe it's that simple.
I did see that apparently the company basically thought like, yeah, we're probably on the tail end of Turtle Mania here, so I think they said it was a budget of only 17 million. So very small, very low expectations going into the third one.
Which is kind of sad, because, you know, I feel like, you know, I'll criticize Hollywood for a lot of things these days, but I think the assumption today would be that you try to reignite Turtle Mania with your third movie, rather than saying, oh, we're accepting this is dead, so we'll only put in half effort and just get a little bit of bank back before it's completely gone.
I have to imagine that Hollywood, when they started making the movies, genuinely had no idea why Turtles was actually working. They were like, probably. Sure, yeah, let's go to movie, yeah, why not? But then by the time it hit this point, they're like, they would love to reignite it, but they had no idea what ignited it in the first place.
Because I think, like, obviously there's a lot of bad examples, but there's so many like movies that try to be these soft reboots to reignite a franchise. We see it with Terminator, we see it with Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was kind of successful. Terminator has never managed to reignite.
We see it with Star Wars, we see it with Terminator, we see it with Terminator, we see it with Terminator.
And don't get me wrong, like a lot of these examples aren't very good, and I'll complain about nostalgia sequels and all that, but I think that at least there's an attempt that they're trying to like make it a big thing again. So it's kind of sad that with this Turtles trilogy, the company just kind of threw it in the towel and went, let's just squeeze out a little bit of rush money, whatever we can, before the teat is dry. Yeah. And that's all it is. So you get this movie that is, you know, underwhelming. It feels like a direct-to-video sequel. It just happened to be released theatrically.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I would have put the last one on a direct-to-video level as well. I don't think it really had as much big-time quality behind it to say that it was always destined to be theatrical.
I mean, that's fair, except you had Vanilla Ice. You don't get a big song by a popular artist in a direct-to-video movie.
I'm going to look up Vanilla Ice's IMDb and see how many times it says direct-to-video, because I have to imagine it's more than 50% of them.
Well, yeah, but not at this like, later he would be direct-to-video.
Oh, yeah,
but,
yeah, absolutely.
But in his pinnacle, when he was a name... Yeah, whatever movie career he's had, like when he started dwindling down, yeah, that's a completely different thing. I mean, hell, Bruce Willis was a movie star who was in blockbusters, who was in successful movies, but you look at his last 15 years and you'll find nothing but direct-to-video trash.
Yeah, fair.
So, you know, that just it goes that way sometimes. But all right, let's get into the movie as it is. We start off. So spoilers, if that wasn't clear. We start off in Japan. We get this, you know, the rising sun. You know, this very spectacular looking shot. It almost fools you into thinking there's some visual style in this movie. It's all gone after this opening couple of shots.
It did fool me. I was sitting there. They were riding at sunrise on the beach, slow motion horses. I was like, my word, they've turned this franchise around. And then as soon as they're off the beach, it looks like the set of like the third sequel to Willow.
Yeah, it's just any scene in that forest you've ever seen, basically. It just introduces, it teases a couple of characters. There's not a lot of context in this scene for it, though. You sort of learn later on, like, who this woman is, and who this, you know, it turns out to be the prince that the honor guard are chasing down to bring him back to his father, the Lord. Lord Norinaga is his name.
Norinaga, got it.
So... but we cut back to, you know, the abandoned subway station, the den, as they call it, and we see the turtles, and we get them doing the dance from Breakfast Club, amongst other things.
They really love that Breakfast Club dance. They did it like 4 times in this movie.
They did it start and the end. I don't remember if they really did it anywhere else.
All right, a little bit of exaggeration. Though I do want to point out that last movie, I made mention of how the first movie did a very good job of building up the title, and then the second movie it felt kind of lackluster. This one, I swear they just forgot to put in the film a shot for the title to go on.
It's just a quiet shot of the den, and then they just kind of like start dancing and the music starts. But yeah, the title has no fanfare whatsoever. It's really weird. Really, really strange. But so April is going on vacation, and she's, to make good to the turtles because they're going to miss her, she's bought them a bunch of crap at a flea market. So the movie kicks off with her giving them all weird presents, like she gives Donnie an old radio that he can work on and tinker with, gives Mikey a lampshade for a joke.
Yeah, I don't think Mikey got it either. I think he turned it into a joke, but I think she was like, sure, here's something.
Mikey's weird. He likes something weird.
One thing to point out of what did happen this opening is Raphael is very angry that they have to live in secret and nobody knows who they are. So I'm guessing they end of Turtles 2 just got written off. They were like, yes, those were actually men in costume.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point. Leonardo gets a book about blades or knives or something. I
mean, it doesn't matter.
I don't know. He was holding it.
It could literally just be porn, and it's like, yeah, sure, that's just as important to the plot. Moving on.
Well, he's a teenage boy after all. Yeah. But one of the things she got for Splinter was this. They call it. I mean, they joke that it's an egg timer. I think later on they call it a scepter or something like that. But it's like a lantern. Like, why are they calling it anything but a lantern? Because that's what it is.
Because there's no light in it. There's a little Harry Potter time turner thing going on.
It lights up when the time travel stuff starts.
Fair, but that's not because of a light bulb.
True. So basically, because someone picks this up in the past in Japan, and April's holding it, she switches places with the Lord's son, right? And he's there. And what's interesting is that when they swap, they end up wearing each other's clothes. So good job April was wearing something a bit more neutral. She's wearing jeans and like a leather jacket as opposed to like a fancy dress or something. Which
I still think that would have been good comedy, but hey, whatever.
They're all a bit inconsistent with this rule though about the clothes switcheroo.
Okay, so the way Donnie, he later on does some investigation, he comes up with the idea of equal mass displacement, which immediately doesn't make any sense because the turtles have to weigh at least like 300 pounds, but ignoring that, they have this idea that only two things around the same weight can change back and forth with each other. However, for some reason, April gets to keep her Sony Walkman, and it goes back in time with her.
Yep, that doesn't make much because she's wearing that just like the clothes, so why wouldn't they still be on the other guy?
And then, of course, later on, the turtles will teleport as well, and they get to keep pretty much everything they were wearing. Like their entire outfits of their weapons and their bandanas, all of that gets to go with them. So,
what's notable is that Mikey puts on these like Hawaiian shorts for whoever he's switching with, and sure enough, when the four Japanese men come into like the subway, the one of them that swapped with Mikey is wearing these shorts and he's wearing nothing else. The other three are wearing all I can describe this as, it's as if they had like tighty whities, but the tighty whities also have like a chest plate, almost as if it was mirroring the turtles' chest, like they're like the I don't know what we call it.
It just seems like an ancient Japanese like undergarment, like a coverall more or less.
You didn't think this was intentionally mimicking the shape of like the turtle's body, their chest and like crotch area?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, it might have been, but I think it was more so a thing of, hey, clearly in ancient Japan, they wouldn't be wearing Fruit of the Loom. So we just need something to cover them.
Well, here's a question I have for you. At the end of the movie, when they travel back, why is the guy wearing Mikey's shorts still wearing Mikey's shorts in feudal Japan?
Why are the other ones still wearing that same undergarment, despite the fact that they should have teleported? Like, they left that in the past. It was not with them. None of that makes any sense. The time travel here is not. No, but I thought the
undergarment was still something they were wearing. I thought that's what you were suggesting.
No, I don't think. I think once they got changed into normal clothes, I think that Casey probably was like, okay, take off that. Here's what boxer shorts are.
No. I mean, when they first teleport, they've got this white thing on.
Oh, yeah. I was talking about the end of the movie. I thought that's what you were talking about.
No. They've got this white thing on that kind of mimics the shape of like the turtle's body, but it's just like white as if it's like, underwear.
Yeah. Again, there is no rules. They try to... That was the most beautiful part of Leo trying to explain it, is that he was like, oh, it's equal mass displacement. And then he starts to go into a little more detail, and I think I said Leo. Donnie is explaining it. But then Leo immediately interrupts him, and it's just like, that I don't care. And I feel like that was the writer just being like, if we give too much information, we are immediately going to have to break these rules. So we're just going to leave it as vague as humanly possible.
Very possible. April, of course, immediately is looked at like she's a witch because she's there and the son of the Lord is missing.
Yep.
And when she's put before the Lord, her Walkman like falls out and turns on. And they all look at it like it's a demon because there's like sound coming from, and it's it's music, it's modern music, of course, so it sounds weird to them.
It's rhythm of the night.
So the Lord has some of his men slash at it with their katanas to destroy it. And this is where we get the villain Walker hamming it up because he comes in to question April, and she's like, "Yeah, I am a witch, and I can turn you into soup." And he's like, "Go on then, do it. You don't have any power."
I mean, he is... It's strange because they introduced him actually in an earlier scene where he just rides into the courtyard of the palace and it's just like, hey.
Yeah, it's the scene where his honor guard bring the son back and he sort of leaves the scene, and then Walker comes in with his like head gun because he's got a gun.
Yeah. I can't remember his name. Niles, that was it.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, the entire scene is basically just him saying like, hey, you've got a war going on and I've got English steel. What do you want to do? And that's pretty much all he is for the movie until I'd say probably the third act, when all of a sudden he has this entirely different thing going on in terms of motivations, which we'll get to. But for most of the movie, it's less that he's the villain and more that he's just an opportunist, I guess I would say.
The movie treats him like he's the villain, though. Like, he's the one who gets the dark music. He's the one who feels the most intimidating, you know.
But in terms of actual, like, motives and things he does, it seems like the daimyo is the bigger villain to start with. Like, I honestly thought there was going to be a bait and switch because he offers, like, hey, let me question this woman. Let me see what she knows, and then you can do whatever you want to her. And I was like, oh, he's trying to get her out of this situation. But then the daimyo doubles down and says, no, I'm throwing her in the dungeon because I want her to suffer. So it seems like they're at the start making the Lord the bigger villain, despite the fact that the movie as a whole treats Walker as the main villain. So I don't know what was going on in that early bit, if it was intentional or if it was just poor writing.
Probably, I kind of got the impression that the Lord is bad, although maybe not irredeemable. The idea that he maybe can learn from his son, and, like, you know, like, peace can be brought to the land, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I kind of took Walker as the villain for a few reasons. Other than just the obvious, there's evil music and he's kind of hamming it up. Is that one, he's the evil white man who's come to this land to exploit everyone.
Yes, I have seen Avatar.
Very good. He, you know, it does feel like he'll hold things back. It feels like he's always manipulating. It feels like he wants to not just make money, but later on as the movie goes on, obviously he actually starts lying about the fact that he's got certain things, and he, you know, it kind of becomes, it feels like it's a quest for power, and he's out for himself rather than, like, actually trying to help the Lord. You know, he'll screw him over the first chance he gets if it's going to benefit him. It's kind of the vibe that I get right from the start.
Yeah, I think a thing they were trying to lean on in this movie, is considering everyone is samurai, is the idea of honor. They mention that every once in a while of, like, oh, we will die here, but only one of us will die with honor. But if they lean on that enough, then it would make sense that Walker is the bigger villain out of the two, because he is willing to double cross, he is willing to backstab, he's willing to throw people down in front of him so that he can get up higher. So if that's where they were going, it makes sense that Walker is the bigger villain between the two.
He also has very accurate cannons.
Oh, I don't know why he's even bothering making deals here, because those cannons could shoot the daimyo from 3 miles away.
He likes we see him, like, test his cannon on the beach. He's got some like dummies up to test it, and he basically fires a cannon through all the heads of the dummies, and then later on, like, there's a moment in the big final fight where he has a cannon aimed at Leonardo, and Leonardo, to avoid it, just ducks, you know, goes into his shell. He just puts his head at his shell. So the cannonball literally just goes through where his head was. And I'm like, that's very accurate for a cannon. You know, a cannon's not an accurate firearm where you can pinpoint your target.
No.
Especially this time period. Like, I buy that some modern, like, not cannons exactly, but, like, I buy that there's a modern equivalent that has, like, you know, computer guided, like, targeting and shit like that. They could probably do it. Yeah, missiles, yes.
Yeah.
But a cannon in, like, 1607 or whatever this is?
I do want to point out, yes, they are wildly unaimable, but he, at both of those times, his target was maybe like 20 feet away. Like, it's not like he's going way far, because most cannons are used as the long range weapon. That's their point, is that they can shoot things from far away and still do damage. He was literally within walking distance, and he's like, now let's see if this is gonna work, and he just sets it off.
Yeah, okay. It struck me as odd the first time he lights that cannon, and I was like, wait, come on.
The first time he lights the cannon, there's literally no reason for him to light the cannon. He just does it for effect. He's like, hey guys, watch this.
Well, that's actually one of the problems, and this is just like a typical script writing thing that I had a problem with here, is that scene where he lights the cannon, you know, like, a guy from the Lord comes and tells him, hey, like, our Lord's accepted your terms of payment, gold for guns. And this bothered me because the last scene that him and the Lord were in, the Lord says quite specifically, no, I will not cross that line. I will not, you know, pay you gold for guns. I will do it our way. And the problem with that is that that's okay if there's another reason why the Lord changes his mind. That's an arc. That's like, okay, something motivates him to give in and do the thing that he said he would never do. But there's no scenes with the Lord between those two scenes. We get a scene where he tells him, I will under no circumstances do what you do and use your guns and pay you gold for them. And then the next scene we see, he sent a lackey to tell him, yeah, I've changed my mind.
I agree wholeheartedly. I do feel like there are scenes cut here because the one that got to me was actually at the very end of the movie. It's time for them to switch back bodies because for some reason they do like a Bill and Ted thing here, where it's like, ah, yes, we can switch back with this long ago time, so long as we're both holding the thing at the same time, but we only have like 60 hours to do it. And I'm like, bro, it is time travel. As soon as you start using real-time measurements, it's time travel. It should work whenever. But regardless, Casey is watching over the Japanese men, and he's like, all right, everybody, time to go back to your time. And they make another Wayne's World joke of, oh, yeah, totally. Not. And they just stick around. And then all of a sudden, they come back. There's no interstitial scene. There's nothing to say why.
Very true.
They come back. There's just... They don't want to, and then they do.
Yeah, it sets up that Casey's going to have to convince them in some way, but then it just cuts to him arriving with them and saying, oh, there was traffic. And that almost reads like it's supposed to be a funny line, because we should have seen all the trouble he went through to actually get them to come back, but we don't. Mm-hmm. He's shown up with them. So again, there's multiple things in this movie where like characters have changed their minds on things between scenes that we never have a reason for.
Right.
They just have.
I mean, I have to assume that based off of the pacing, they did intend for it to show up, but then it got cut for one reason or another. Because otherwise, otherwise it's just a horrible plot hole that any competent writer should have seen.
I mean, the movie is like, it's almost 100 minutes. It's like 96 or 97 minutes.
I think it's the longest one. I can't remember how long the first one was, but it's definitely longer than the second.
And I wonder if that's like the thing is that maybe the first cut was like, you know, another 10 minutes longer, and they were like, oh my god, this is like almost an hour 50. No, you can't have that. Like cut this down to get to 90 minutes.
I'm sorry, our target audience here are 11-year-olds, and we are worried they're even going to be able to get past the opening credits. Put in a Breakfast Club scene.
Oh yeah, because the 11-year-olds will all get that reference and clap.
I don't know how long John Hughes movies have a shelf life for.
Breakfast Club.
They're like me. I can relate.
Oh dear. So yeah, I mean, there's a bit of prep with the Turtles trying to figure out how to go back in time, but ultimately it's just hold the scepter. 4 guys from the past hold the scepter. They switch. They land on horseback.
Okay, but like the holding the scepter thing throws me for a loop. Because you're right. It should be that they all have to hold the scepter in order to go back. That's like a rule that's been established. But they're all in the middle of a battle. How could all 4 of them be holding this scepter in the middle of this battle? Yeah,
just to clarify what David's saying here. When the Turtles go back in time, they arrive on top of horses in the middle of a big fight that's happening. And it's played for comedy, you know, Mikey's on his horse backwards going, you know, someone, you know, where's the steering wheel or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of those jokes. But yeah, what were they all on horseback just holding it in the middle together for some unbeknownst reason?
Yeah. And the other thing is that they keep on saying that it needs to be at like the same time, yet separated by like 400 years or whatever.
I mean,
so we're all for... That's the part that gets me, is the fact that like they need to all be holding this scepter at the same time in order to teleport back to their own time period.
I think what I was trying to say is that there's a window of time, kind of like, I mean, it's not this, but that's just for example's sake, say a full moon, right? This only works during a full moon, so it has to be a full moon both in the past and the present day, and then you know, and maybe there's a constant like tether between them, so that, so like in the TV show Dark, for example, right? There's like a time door thing, right? I won't get into it too much, but all I'll say is that it always takes you 33 years exactly in the past and forwards. So time's moving forward in both ends, always.
Okay. So should I get out the piece of paper and a pencil to show you how wormholes work?
So I'm assuming that's what it's trying to say here, is that time is moving forward in both. It's not like you can just go back to an earlier time period. Like there's always this tether that the magic staff scepter thing incurs.
I believe the official name is Time Scepter.
Time Scepter, right? So,
so as long as there's a window, if there's a window, I can accept it. That's fine.
Yes.
It just seemed like they always had to do it because there was this sense of urgency to it at the very end, where they're like, "Come on, we got to go now," and it's like, okay, but
I think that's what Donnie was trying to explain earlier. He doesn't say these exact words, but I think it was something like, you know, like you have to do it whilst the Jupiter's in alignment with something, or you know, like it was that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a window in which it works, and then it won't work anymore until later. You know, it'll be another kind of like, you know, when prepping to go to Mars, NASA is like, well, we have a window, and then if we don't go now, we have to wait another 30 years because the orbits have to line up a certain way or whatever.
Right. Got it.
So I think that's what it was getting at.
Yeah. So they end up in feudal Japan, and they are expecting to swap with a bunch of priests because they thought the scepter would be kept in like a holy room or something like that. But it turns out that they were bringing it on to battle as like a good luck charm.
Well, I think that's where it was when the son who travels first with April,
Right.
that's where he found it. But presumably because his son went missing, and now they think the scepter's special, he's now got his honor guard guarding it.
Right. Mm.
So, three of the turtles minus Mikey end up just sort of going looking for the, you know, they kind of stay with the army, and because they've got the Shogun masks on, they kind of just the movie just pretends that no one can tell that their body shape is completely different, despite the fact that it's very obvious.
Yeah.
Just
like,
go with it.
There was one guy. There was a really big guy who was in charge of the dungeon in the past, and I thought that was going to be like they were just going to get 4 guys of that size, and that was going to be who the turtles flipped with, because then I could understand this 300-pound turtle swapping with somebody. But no, it's just 4 regular dudes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm glad that non-flexible armor somehow managed to stretch far enough for their shells.
It's kind of that so it's actually funny that Quantum Leap's brought up, because it's kind of a Quantum Leap rule where it's like the clothes actually change to fit the person that you've swapped with. You know, it's like they all, because, you know, like April's clothes magically just fit the other guy perfectly. And maybe in that case they actually went for like a sort of slim guy because they thought, oh, that'll explain the mask thing. But why go to the trouble if the turtles are clearly, like you say, twice the size of anyone they're swapping with?
Yeah. I'm not... Okay. At the beginning, I said that I liked this plot more than the last one. I do want to point out, I recognize that it has many issues. I'm not saying that it doesn't.
It's Swiss cheese.
I just think it's more entertaining than a lot of the last one, in terms of the last one felt so broken and so non-cohesive as a plot, where this one felt very structured. Generic, but structured.
Yeah, but it's Swiss cheese, and I mean that twofold. I mean, it's cheesy and it's full of holes.
Bravo.
Perfect. So, yeah. Which, by the way, Mikey's really upset that feudal Japan doesn't have pizza. So there's a lot less pizza stuff in this. There's like one joke, of course, where he tries to make pizza later on and burns it.
I really am surprised there was no scene in this movie where either Leo or Donnie didn't step up and start like critiquing them for messing with the time stream. Yeah, like there was no Doc Brown moment where they're like, you gotta stay away from your family.
You can't invent pizza and show it to the Japanese before like it spreads from Italy. Come on now.
But no, they were just like, nah, we're just us being here is messed stuff up. Do whatever you're gonna do.
Except maybe not, because before they even go, there's a scroll that shows that sometime in the past, by their standards, so there's a legend that these 4 green demons called Kappa, showed to take on the establishment, right? So it's almost suggesting that sometime in the future, the Turtles will again travel back in time to further back in the timeline and set up this prophecy, meaning that the Turtles were always going to come back for this trip and go back home.
Okay, trivia time.
Okay.
This movie was loosely based off of a 2-comic arc called Masks, where they went back in time to feudal Japan and did this thing. However, in the comic arc, they went back to 1300s feudal Japan instead of 1600s, meaning it lines up with them saying hundreds of years ago this happened. So I almost wonder whether or not they were saying like, no, the comic arc also happened here as well.
Okay, I think I would say that's like an Easter egg, but it's not something that's like, oh, everything that happened in the comics is officially canon in the movies.
That's fair.
that doesn't feel right at all, because it doesn't feel
I
like
mean, clearly it can't be, because they didn't have like a Bebop or Rocksteady or anything like that.
Yeah. And it also, like, it feels like in the movies, like, it mentions in the first movie that first time where they go and save April is the first time they've went out and fought anyone. And then Turtles 2 is set right after Turtles 1. Maybe there's a little bit of time has passed between 2 and 3, but not that much.
So then here's the question. What if the Turtles movies, the trilogy as a whole, act as somewhat prequels for the comic?
I mean, I've not read the original comics from the 80s.
Neither have I. But I'm just saying it would explain how you're saying at some point in the future they go back even further in time. That would say how this comic happens after the third movie. That being said, I'm sure in the comic they would have been like, hey, remember when we went back to feudal Japan that first time? And I'm sure they didn't, because it came out 2 years prior to this movie. I know it doesn't line up properly, but I do think it is a little Easter egg where they're like, nah, see, they just keep going back to feudal Japan. It keeps happening.
I'm also pretty sure the original comic probably did some of the origin at some point.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think you can say the movies are I think it's an Easter egg it's kind of like in the same way that comic books, because they keep retconning things and keep doing new, DC with the Crisis and stuff. Like, sometimes they just bring things back in from older timelines that shouldn't be there, but everyone wants them to be there. This feels like just mixing things together because this is a fun nod for the comic fans. But at the same time, I don't think, like, this has not blown my mind, and it's not made me think, oh, this plot's way more genius than I thought it was before.
You don't understand. This is the multiverse of Turtles now.
I mean, do you know what? I will say this. Before we go into other plot details, this movie's bad, and I don't like I like it less than the second one, and it deserves like kind of the reputation it has. That said, though, it's not like it's still kind of watchable. There's definitely much worse, and there's definitely when I think of part 3s that completely shit the bed, or I think of just bad sequels that came later for certain franchises, and this is, when I compare Turtles 3 to like any Hellraiser movie after, say, the third one, like, this is better than all those sequels, right? This is better than Hellraiser 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? This is better than, pick, and the horror is easy to, because there's a lot of horror franchises that went with big numbers.
I got you.
But this is like, it's bad, it's not good enough, and it's, there's a little bit of interest watching it now from a historical perspective to like sort of look at it and sort of analyze, okay, this is the choices they made, why did they do this? In most cases it is to save money, or because they hired someone who wrote a kiddie movie and didn't really care about the finer details or whatever. But it's not that bad. It's bad in the context of the other two movies. It's bad in the context of what you want out of it, but it's not like one of the worst movies ever made. Because maybe at the time when I saw it as a kid, it was one of the worst movies I'd ever seen, because my scope was smaller. But having seen a lot more movies, there is much worse.
Yeah, I think that this movie, like you said, not bad, very generic, very it didn't have to be a Turtles movie, but I think that's why you dislike it so much more, is because it's not a good Turtles movie. We don't have any Shredder. We don't have any of the characters that we want to see. We just have the Turtles dropped into a story that basically is not about the Turtles at all.
Yeah, which I think, like, if it was better written, I think it would get over those problems in a weird way, though. Like, see if it kind of became Seven Samurai with Turtles, where it became about them making a choice to help people that, they had nothing to do with. Like, you could do something with that, and I appreciate that Leo's the one who fights, like, the Lord, the idea that he's the leader, so he takes on the one who's, in theory, the most skilled as a swordsman or whatever. Like, there's like little touches that make some sense. I mean, it's the bare minimum, but it is there. I can see like a version of this story that's less kiddie that make it feel more impactful. And they try to do something with Mikey, don't get me wrong. This idea that Mikey wants to stay in the past because he likes it better here is an interesting idea. That he likes the people more. Raph even kind of agrees with them, because like one of the first things Raph points out is like, hey, this water looks clean. Like there's no tires, there's no beer cans. This is like way better than New York. Like, why don't we stay here? And of course the answer at the end, the ultimate convincing factor is, well, if you don't go back, then the people that swap with you don't get to come back here either. So that's kind of unfair.
But that's what gets me, though. If we're just gonna go straight to this, is that the guys said they don't want to go back. They want to spend their time here.
Oh,
like
sure.
The turtles say that, and the Japanese guys say that. But they keep on saying it as if it's this thing where, like, all of us have to switch or else it won't work. But we know that's not true. Basically, what it comes down to is them saying, like, look, we can't break up. We are a group of 4. If we split up across 2 different time periods, everything's going to hell.
Well, yeah, but this is all irrelevant what you're saying, because the Turtles and co have no way of knowing that the others don't want to come back, or if some of them want to come back and some don't, then which ones want to come back and which ones don't. Like, what if the numbers don't match up? What if, like, 3 people want to stay in the present, but only 2 turtles want to stay in the past? Like,
I counter that point with the point of, I mean, just full spoilers for the end here.
We're in spoilers, it's fine.
Yeah, I just, if we're doing it in order. So Mikey, he wants to stay in the past. They eventually convince him not to, and the whole teleportation thing is starting, and he doesn't actually make it. He is too late. He doesn't grab hold of April's hand, and he's stuck in the past. They show that one of the Japanese guys managed to stay, and he starts running away with the time scepter because he wanted to stay. He didn't want to go either. But then Mikey ends up making, they do it again, and he ends up going back and changing places with the guy. So clearly there was extra time where they could have easily popped back and been like, hey, Casey, did anybody want to stay? Because we got Raph and Mikey here who didn't want to go. And Casey'd be like, yeah, sure, these guys. And it's like, all right, cool.
Okay, sure, but that's interesting. There's a whole other problem with that, though. Like, my problem with this isn't the logistics of, like, my problem is that, one, the Turtles never thought about that, right? That the people don't get to come back to their own timeline, right? And they're making that choice for them. 2, as soon as that's brought up, and some of them do immediately just change. Like, Leo immediately goes, oh yeah, you're right. Like, that's bullshit. We can't just, like, make that choice for them. Right. But my problem is that shouldn't be what changes Mikey's mind, because it's like an easy cop-out, and he has no argument for it. The arc for Mikey should be that he's tempted to stay here, but ultimately chooses to go back for the right reasons, which is, he has to go back because otherwise, otherwise he's never going to see Splinter again. Otherwise, he's never going to, other things. Like, this idea that this isn't really his time and he doesn't belong here is why he should want to leave it, not because, technically it's been a dick move to someone else. I think the choice has been made for the wrong reasons, and the actual, like, logistics of, like, who wants to stay and who wants to go.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess what it comes down to me is that, like, both sides show that there is a sizable majority that like it where they are, and they're only going back for the reasons of, we have to. Like, it's not. At one point, Mikey says, like, it's destiny, and I hate that. I don't like that idea. But what makes it destiny? It's just them saying, the turtles got to stick together. That's really the only reason that Mikey lands on, is that, I can't not go with them because we might have another movie to do.
Yeah. I think in a larger sense, though, I mean, the characters themselves don't say this, but I would say, well, because you don't belong in this time period, you have to go back to your time period. That's just simple logic. Like,
I mean, you're right.
That's just a straight matter-of-fact way of it. I think this is the sort of thing where the writing could have explored why he wants to stay more. So it's not just that he bonds with the kid, or he kind of has feelings for Mitsu, the main Japanese character.
You say kinda, like.
Well, I say kinda in the sense that it can never go anywhere because he's a turtle. But, like, the point I'm making is, he has these feelings, and that's kind of why he wants to stay. What would be more interesting is the idea that because they have been trained, in the way of the ninja by Splinter, that they actually find some appeal of staying in feudal Japan because they, like, very quickly are accepted by people. There's a whole big thing in the middle where the bad guys come and they try to raid the village, and the turtles fight them off. And ultimately, they learn to like the turtles, and they're not scared of them anymore in this town, this village, because the little kid almost dies. Mikey risks his life to save him from the burning building, which we mentioned with the backdraft reference. And then Leo gives him CPR to save him, right? Because the kid's, like, basically dying, and they try to stop him because, like, he's doing some sort of weird magic thing to him. And April's like, no, he's helping him. And the kid, wakes up, he starts coughing, and it's like, shit, okay, we are now friends with the turtles, and they all kind of bow to them and go down to one knee. And the turtles are like, okay, we don't really want to be overlords or anything, but this is better than wanting to kill us. So
yeah,
we'll go with that.
I honestly, I wonder if this would have been better because they kind of split it across Raphael and Mikey.
Yeah.
They split the idea of staying. Raphael finds a friend in that young kid whose name is Yoshi.
He bonds with the kid, and he also finds that he kind of he develops a little bit as a character because the kid sort of gets angry, and Ralph says, "Hey, watch that." Watch that temper. And he's like, wait, did I just say that? Because I'm Raphael. That's my thing. I have the temper. Like, there's a little bit of growth there for him as a character. And I think if they explored the idea, like, why this time period appeals to them over the present day New York, even though, again, we have to kind of ignore the fact that there was a bit of public exposure at the end of the last movie, which is just kind of swept under the rug. We'll just ignore that.
Yeah.
But the fact that here they're kind of respected by at least this whole village, and that maybe, this could be quite peaceful living here. There's also a joke towards the end where someone can say, hey, but Mikey, there's no pizza here. He's like, yeah, never mind. Screw all those plans.
That would actually probably be the most character development he could get, is if Leo says that, like, jokingly, like, look, there's no pizza, but Mikey's like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that would actually be a big character moment for him.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like, I appreciate them making the choice because he can't make this choice for the other humans, right? That they won't come back instead.
Yeah.
I just think there's more of a narrative thing they could do with the characters, where if they actually explored what about this time period appeals to them, where it's less cruel than present day, or it's less like prejudice, which is actually incorrect from I think if we actually analyze time periods, it's actually not. It's way more prejudice. But at the very least, though, because they're more superstitious in this time period, they'll accept them as like beings. Whereas in the present day, it's like, wait, what sort of freak are you? Like, what is this?
In the past, Splinter says at the beginning that kappas, which are actual Japanese mythological figures, they could either be good or bad, and so they would be, I guess, more represented in the same way of if you came across like an elf or something like that, instead of a monster, as I think they would be more represented in New York.
Oh, you mean like fantasy, not like Santa's elf?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's just because we did the Santa Claus trilogy recently. That's what my mind went to. I was like, what, an elf? Like from the North Pole?
Sorry, a dwarf. Would that work better?
Sure. Dwarf, elf, halfling, those types of beings. Yeah.
Like, it would just be, the Japanese would see it as that sort of thing. It would be more mystical, more mythological, whereas they show up nowadays in New York, it's just the giant crocodile in the sewer sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, in this time period, obviously not modern day Japan, I'm pretty sure if the turtles showed up in Tokyo in 1993, they'd have a similar kind of reaction to New York.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I mean, I don't know. They do have the whole Godzilla franchise going on over there. It would just be Nilla, little Nilla Jr.
It's Godzilla's babies that have shown up. That's what you
exactly.
think. Yeah, I mean, maybe obviously I'm saying it could make more out of all these things, and if it was actually this sort of good character drama at the center where the turtles are kind of questioning their existence and where they belong, that could be quite good. I think it's a lot thinner than that, which is why it kind of boils down to what it does with Mikey, and to an extent Raph.
But I mean, getting away from the turtles and talking about, because again, this is a movie that could exist without the turtles. The part that I think actually works better is there is this, I don't want to call it political intrigue, because it's not. There is just this story going on of, there is a daimyo, a lord, who is very cruel in some unspecified way. He's launching war against the rebels. He's enlisted the help of this English guy to give him weapons in order to wage this war. And it's just them trying to, this group of rebels, win their freedom against these overarching powers. And is it generic as hell? Of course it is. There's nothing that stands out as, oh, this is creative for this specific one. It's 100% the same cookie cutter story that you would imagine it to be, but it is still competent in a lot of ways. It still is telling the story, as generic as it is, competently. So I think that that's where I come down as a little bit better than the second movie, in that aspect of the story. The turtles, they hit or miss on what they do. But that aspect of the story is the stronger part, I feel.
Well, let's talk about another character then. Let's talk about Wit, which is the character in the past played by Elias Koteas, who April, when she first sees him in the cell, is like, Casey? And he just sort of looks at her like, what? And she's like, oh, no, not quite. And then there's a joke where she looks down at a rat and goes, oh, I recognize you too. So, which by the way, they kept someone faints when they see Splinter for the first time gag. The first guy time travels to the future, sees Splinter and passes out.
Yep, the Prince Kinshin.
Yep. But he kind of like throughout is like sort of in shock of the Turtles, obviously, and he's kind of like maybe infatuated with April a little bit. And he at one point, asks like, "Hey, like, can you take me with you when you go back to present day? Like, this magical land you come from?" And she's like, "Nah, you wouldn't fit in. I mean, you kind of would, but not really." And the twist later on is that he's actually working for the villain, and he steals the scepter. When they find the scepter, because it's the little kid that had it from before, he steals it, takes Mitsu at knife point back to the villain and gives him the scepter and all the rest of it. And it's like, okay, so he turned out to be a villain, and he kind of has a redemption to a point later on where the big final fight's happening, and when the bad guy says, hey, shoot them and kill them all, he's like, hey, I didn't agree to that. And I'm like, there was nothing about you from before that made me think that you would have opposed that, to be honest. It's just all of a sudden you're kind of a good guy.
I do think he is supposed to have had feelings for April that were real. I think that was something that they hinted with that take me with you. Like, if she would have said yes, I do think there would have been a thing of him like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop being a spy then, and I'm going to go with you. But obviously she said no, so he just doubled down on the spy plan.
Honestly, like, I'd been all to watch this, so I didn't really remember exactly some of the details of this going into it. It kind of read to me until the villain, Walker, actually said, this is why I hired him, and he was a plant all along. It actually read to me as he wanted to go back with April, and when she turned him down, he went a bit incel and decided to take another route instead. Well, in that case, I'm going to make some money from turning you all in.
I mean, there is a point in this movie before we find out that he was hired that it seemed like he was doing the thing of like, I'm going to get back in the good graces of my my boss.
Yeah. Instead, he tries to kind of do a bit of a face turn towards the end, and it's not even like that big a deal. Like, the villain just kind of says, well, I'll shoot you too then. And then obviously that's when, the good guys manage to win.
Okay, now I just want to real quick, when it comes to the villain, Walker, there is a point...
Texas Ranger.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
There is a point where he goes up to his bird cage, and he's like, hello, little birdies, hi. And then it's not mentioned again. And then at the very end of the movie,
hold on.
Is it? Because I missed it if it is.
Well, it's not mentioned again after, but before that, it's heavily mentioned that he doesn't like kids and that he keeps birds now instead. And then his henchman tries to say, he keeps this type of bird. And then he goes, shut up, Niles. And it's set up at the start that he really likes his birds.
Okay. Right? I completely forgot that because that was an hour between bringing it back and doing it.
What I want to bring up, though, so the running gag at the end, that when he realizes that he's not going to beat the Turtles, he grabs his bird cage and runs away. Or, more to the point, he runs away and then comes back and goes, oh shit, I can't forget my bird cage. He's like, come on. And then he does it again when he's trying to escape down the rope, and he leaves the birdcage at the top of the castle, and he's like, no, my birdcage, damn it, not again.
Yep.
It's this running gag that he keeps forgetting, but going back for his birdcage because he really likes his birds. And all I could hear in my head through all this stuff at the end was, I wanted my bird.
Yeah.
From Iron Man 2.
Give me my bird.
I feel like Iron Man 2 was inspired by Turtles 3. That's what I got from this viewing of this movie, is all I could see was Mickey Rourke going, I won my bird.
I mean, it would explain the critical reaction to both movies. So
Iron Man 2 was not that well received. So
yep, I'll give you that.
There's some precedent.
But the reason I bring that up is because obviously there's supposed to be some parallels, if not a straight ancestorship to Casey between Wit.
Although they never mention it or bring it up. We're saying that as the audience, but it's never actually like, hey, he must be the Turtles, I don't even think react to the fact that it looks like Casey. Only April does.
Yeah, but at the end of the movie, Walker's climbing down that rope, and Wit literally does the thing from the first movie of oops, and he flips the thing, which fires a flaming ball at Walker and knocks him off the edge of his castle into the sea. He doesn't say oops, but it's the exact same motion. He flips a lever, it happens.
But the sentiment of him pretending that he didn't isn't there. Because that's what the oops is. The oops is like, oops a daisy, I did that. Right. Like that sentiment's not there, but I see the comparison. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So one piece of trivia I did want to bring up is, obviously we have the Wit thing. It may be a ancestor to Casey. On the scroll that showed the hundreds of years ago when the Turtles first showed up, we get a very quick glimpse of someone who appears to be Shredder, or wearing at least the Shredder armor, is on there. And then, additionally, the kid's name that Raph takes a liking to is Yoshi, which happens to be the name of the sensei that Splinter trained with.
Okay.
That's all. I'm just saying there's a lot of ancestor stuff going on here, where it's like maybe all of this stuff filters down into the future.
Well, in the modern IDW comics, right? Like Splinter was actually from feudal Japan time, right? It wasn't something that happened just before. There was actually, it was built into the story that was kind of the time that it was from, and same as Shredder. And there's some mystical stuff, reasons why I can't remember exactly now, but like there were some mystical reasons built into the story as to why. So because in the modern comics, Splinter actually had 4 sons that were killed, right? And to him, the Turtles are kind of like the reincarnations of his 4 sons, so they sort of build in more stuff.
You said that he, in the modern stuff, is a guy who became rat-like.
Yes. Or at the very least, he was reincarnated into a rat, or something to that effect.
Got it.
So that makes some sense to me. Like, but his first name is Yoshi here, right? So it's not like this is the ancestor of the guy who trained Splinter. I mean, I guess that's what they're going for, but like it doesn't really make that much sense.
It doesn't, but I just thought it was interesting to bring up because, like you said, the Turtles don't mention anything about the Casey ancestor looking like Casey. So it's interesting that they reused names and imagery that we have already seen before in terms of Yoshi and Shredder.
Do you think if this is just another case of this was actually in there and they cut it all out?
Possibly. I mean, it definitely would be something that could be completely cut out without any impact on the plot.
Yeah, like just a couple of scenes where they react to things, they talk about who the kid might become or something. You know. You
just have Raph being like, my dad knew someone named Yoshi too.
Great impression.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is one thing I forgot to bring up earlier because we zoomed by it so fast. I'm not sure I like Corey Feldman as the voice of Donatello.
Oh, really? So he came back. He returned.
Yeah.
His triumphant return to the franchise.
I think he did it really gravelly. Like much, almost it was almost more of a Raph voice for me than it was a Donatello voice. But yeah, I don't know. I'm more used to the being closer to the way Mikey sounds, I guess. More nasally, more up there.
Yeah. I mean, what did we gloss over? Obviously, Mikey ran into the villain we mentioned earlier. The villain basically saying, hey, you've got all these demons running around now, so what if, you use my guns? That stuff feeds out of the plot. The henchman that he has obviously encounters the Turtles a few times. They give him a wet willy. They do it again when they raid the small village. So at the end of the movie, when they say, hey, you know what time it is? He's like, and he just does he wet willies himself because it's been established. Rule of threes. It's a dumb joke, but it is set up and paid off. So whatever. Yeah.
One strange little side plot in the middle of this, they figure they can't actually find the time scepter again, so they plan on just making a new one.
This is so stupid. But I agree with April so much because it's like, oh, they've drawn up schematics to build a new one. I'm like, okay, you can build a scepter that looks like it, but the magic that actually makes it work as a time travel device, it isn't going to just like happen because you've got like some blacksmith to put it together.
But it's feudal times.
Yeah, but even in this time period, this scepter's like old, right? It came from a different time.
It was inside of a statue that the guy broke, so clearly it's been sealed for a while.
Yeah, exactly. It's super ancient, so yeah, that was just kind of silly.
Yeah. Well, it was silly in the fact they even thought about it, but then they did end up making it, and then they just immediately broke it.
Do you know what? Actually, now I'm thinking about it, the whole thing that Raph has where he kind of befriends Yoshi, and he wants Yoshi to be a kid and not just like be a fighter. You know, he was like, no, you don't worry about the fighting. You have a childhood. You have fun. You have a kid. And he makes him a yo-yo. He's like, hey, I'll show you how to use this tomorrow. And Yoshi's like, no, you maybe die tomorrow because the fight's in the morning.
Dude, Yoshi was dark.
I know. But,
Like...
but I was thinking to myself, on the subject to this, I was thinking, this would actually be quite good if, like, when Raph went back at the end, let's say they set up the idea that, Raph and Splinter have got a little bit of, because Raph's always, not betraying him, but, like, always...
Storming out.
He's always, like, challenging his word. He's always been a little disrespectful. Maybe if Raph at the end of the movie like had a moment with Splinter where he'd learned like, hey, you know what, like I actually had to be a bit of a father figure for like a day,
right.
And I've kind of realized how much of a dick I am to you. So, like again, there's like an arc there that maybe they could have like tied in more to like because Splinter in this movie, like, there's like one moment where he shows a little concern that his sons may not come back, and it's really just him. It's just the music playing as he like looks down and looks kind of sad. But other than that, like Splinter's just there for comic relief for this movie. There's almost nothing else to him.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even say he does anything really comical either.
Well, he puts the lampshade in his head at the end to cheer up Mikey.
Yeah, but that's just at the end of every movie. I was waiting for him to say like, "I still make more funnies," ha ha ha. I'm like, okay, Splinter.
What I thought was really weird is that the credits started rolling before the other turtles like they started rolling as Mikey's like walking up the stairs towards the other turtle. I'm like, I get that you want the credits to play as they're dancing, but they've not even revealed that they're dancing yet. He's just kind of like, I don't know. It felt like they came in a bit early. It's like they want to wrap up the movie. It's like they were shaving like an extra 30 seconds by having the credits start during the last scene.
The only thing I could think is that they wanted to have like some of the credits in front of the freeze frame or something like that.
Okay,
it was just too much to do in front of just the freeze frame, and so they were like, okay, well we'll just play up to that moment. Or what I think is even more likely is that they tested it, they put it out for audiences, and they were like, hey, it seemed like the movie should have ended when Splinter made his joke, and then you just kept going for a while. And it kind of felt like the movie was never going to end. And they were like, oh, okay, well, we'll just, as soon as Splinter makes his joke, we'll just start the credits. So you can pack up your popcorn and sodas.
Yeah, it just felt a bit strange. Other than that, they just, they go to the fortress to get their scepter back. And they fight. There's a big fight scene. The turtles all have moments. Leo cuts off the the Lord's like hair, because the Lord's like, oh, finish me off, and Leo takes out his two swords and does a cross motion like he's going to chop off his head, and then he just chops off his ponytail, and it's like, okay, of course, because they're turtles, they don't kill, right? They're heroes.
Yeah, I was actually very concerned about that for a moment. If we were just going grimdark, because the guy says like, "Do it, finish me," and he's like, okay, and he gets his swords ready. Like,
instead, the Lord gets trapped by the big bell. Which then later, when Leo ducks the cannonball hits the bell, and we get the Lord popping his head up because the cannonball hits the top of the bell. So the Lord pops his head up, and he's got his hair all up and like soot in his face, like a sort of cartoon like explosion.
They reference some celebrity. I think it was Don King.
Yeah, that was the other. Yeah,
yeah.
So many pop culture references.
I would have liked, just as a thing of a tiny little throwaway. Wouldn't even impact the plot, is having the prince inherit the throne and trying to make peace between him and the rebels, because obviously he's in love with Mitsu. Have him inherit the throne because his father is literally deaf, because they fired a cannonball while he is inside of a giant metal bell. He should have his eardrums destroyed.
That's fair. That's fair.
But instead, at the very end of the movie...
I mean, I'm not convinced he would survive at all, but yeah, assuming you could survive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, at the end of the movie, they just have Kenshin return. He sees Mitsu. The Lord is brought in and like thrown down to the ground by the rebels. And then I think they give him back the time scepter and then kiss. I don't think anything else even happens.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I think I appreciate that Donnie is like the one turtle who doesn't even contemplate like wanting to stay in this time period because he's like, no, like I'm a scientist in like electronics. Like, there's no way I'm staying here.
Yeah,
I need circuit boards and shit.
I think it makes sense that the two they picked as one to stay made sense because Donnie, obviously, he needs future stuff. And Leo, I think Leo's just too devoted to Splinter to ever consider staying away.
And he's honorable and all the rest of it. I think maybe one of the things you could have done, I mean, April gets more to do in this in the last one, don't get me wrong, but I think one of the things you could have done to give her like more of like an impact character-wise on the Turtles is maybe have her be the one to kind of like talk Raph into why he needs to come back to her time, because maybe she could, even if it's something as simple as like, no, but we need heroes in the future, and without you guys, like, like think of all the things you've stopped, like in New York already. Like, you're my hero. I need you there. Like, like something like that. Yeah. It's broad, but it works.
Literally, her only thing she threw out there was like, okay, I'm leaving. You're welcome to come with.
Yeah,
and that's pretty much
home.
all she says. Yeah. There's several points in this movie where I think they're trying to play with how the time travel works. And the one thing they said was, I think they like accidentally swallowed a frog or something, and they made the joke of hope it wasn't an ancestor, which I don't think that's how evolution works, but that's just me. But the other one that got me was
well, Mikey does make some jokes about how when he first gets freed, he jokes to the bad guys that he's a princess who's been turned into.
That's right.
A turtle.
I remember that.
So give me a big pucker up and give me a kiss to set me free.
But then someone makes the offhanded mention right there at the end of whether or not, I think it's whether or not if they die in this period, will they ever be born in the future period?
Which is stupid because,
absolutely.
of course you'd still be born because you would just travel back to this time and die. This is the end of your story. That's fine.
Which they just threw it out there and it wasn't even played as a joke. It seemed like they were seriously like laying that as a question for a second and then just
it doesn't make
ignored
any sense.
Yeah.
That was just a dumb line. Yeah. What they could have done is if they realized that maybe Yoshi was going to be the ancestor of the person who trained Splinter, it's like, oh, if we let him die, does that mean that Splinter will never be trained and therefore will never exist? They could have done something with that if they wanted to, but...
True. I feel like that would require a whole scene from Leo basically stating, not Leo, Donnie, saying whether or not this is a branching timeline or a single loop thing.
I don't think this movie was ever interested in getting into the time like mechanics.
I need the multiverse of turtles, god damn it.
I don't think they were ever interested. I guess the only other thing we didn't really talk about is all the antics that the Japanese guys in the present day get up to.
Yes.
They try to rebel at one point and then Casey just turns on the TV to show them hockey and they're just like enamored with this magic box that has people in it. And then he takes them to a bar where they're playing video games in the arcade machine, and
which honestly that came out of nowhere because they were in the den for the longest time.
Yeah,
and then Kenshin's like, "I need to go home now. Mitsu needs me," and then Splinter reveals that they went down to the bar. And it's like, okay, maybe we should have had. That's the plot that I feel was cut down the most. This may have been like. If you're saying there was 10 extra minutes, I imagine 2 minutes of it probably was devoted to a couple extra turtle scenes, and then the remaining 8 would be explaining what these guys are doing in their fish out of water story.
Yeah. Casey tries to get him to play hockey with him as the goalie, and when he says do what you saw on TV, they all just start fighting, and that's the joke, is that hockey's just a bunch of guys fighting. Which, okay, it's a simple, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think there was a good... I would say like 45 minutes where we didn't cut back to them at all.
Oh yeah, it goes a long time. In fact, that scene in the bar where they're playing the video game machine is actually really near the end. Like it's very close to the climax of the movie when we see that. So yeah, I don't think I have much more to add. It's just a very generic direct-to-video style movie that happened to be theatrically released. The animatronics and the faces for the talking are so much worse than the previous movie.
Now, maybe it's just because they are worse. Did the turtles always have such big teeth?
I don't think they were as noticeable before. I think they were either they were further back or something. But yeah, it feels like they were really on show in this movie.
Yeah.
So you got that problem. You've got a villain who's hamming it up, who is so much less interesting, at least in terms of presence and visuals, as the Shredder. You can argue, yeah, the second movie diminished his impact a lot, but you compare it to Shredder in the first movie. Like, this is,
Yeah,
nothing.
The villain is definitely a lot less than the idea of Shredder, of what Shredder should be. Yeah. But he is, by the time you get to their babies, I'm like, all right, well.
Yeah, but at least
it's the same guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I completely agree with that, but hey.
I mean, he doesn't, that's the thing. His name is Walker. He's just a businessman who's on a horse. Like, there's nothing specifically menacing about him, especially when you take into account the whole thing with the Ninja Turtles is mostly ninja-based stuff, like samurais and whatever. It would have been much cooler to have, like, essentially the Black Knight version of a samurai be their, like, final foe. But in the end, it's just some dude who likes birds and has guns.
I want to be a bird.
Iron Man 2.
I want my bird.
Give me my bird.
All right, rate the movie then. I think we're done. I always say it Terminator. Turtles 3.
Turtles 3. I know I said that I liked it more than the last one, but I do recognize that it has some issues. I recognize that it has a lot of stuff missing from it, and it's just kind of, like you said, Swiss cheese. So I'm actually going to rate it the same I gave the last one, as a 6. While I don't think that it is much worse than the last one in terms of overall quality, it does falter in probably the same amount of categories as the second one did. So 6 for me.
Interesting. Yeah, I for me, this is I think I got to go with a 5.
Okay.
That's what feels right to me. I think there's much worse than it. I know some people may think that's actually too high, and I can kind of see why, but I've just seen much worse. Like that's to me, this is a really bland, generic sequel that it does feel connected to the others. It's still, you still got a lot of the same voices. It still feels like the Turtles, but it's just like a really crappy plot idea to me. And obviously, yeah, it's based on a 2-issue comic arc, but it's different when you have a lot of issues of a comic. You can do like weird things for an issue here or there. This is the third movie, and we're doing this weird time travel feudal Japan plot that, maybe if it was taking itself a bit more serious and it had like actual good character arcs for the Turtles, I could maybe get behind it, but it doesn't. It scratches a surface and no more, and it's just kind of unfulfilling. And I think the real test is that I find it unfulfilling as an adult. I found it unfulfilling as a kid. Like, as a kid, this was like super disappointing, this one.
That's the thing, is I'm coming in this purely as an adult, not having any connection to the Turtles as a child. I feel like it would be extra disappointing to be a Turtles kid. Yeah.
So I am going to give this a 5, and it's scraping a 5. Like, I was really tempted to go lower, but I'll give it the 5. So that is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. Next time, we will be jumping ahead to the next live-action Turtles movie, which is the one from 2014, produced by Michael Bay and directed by, I think, the guy who did Underworld, which I hate. So, good luck with that.
Again, I have nothing to do with this one. Though, real quick, jumping in, I just assume this doesn't make the cut.
Oh, sure.
Or are you going that extra level?
Am I going down to cut your losses? I think it's bordering on cut your losses, to be honest.
If you're bordering, I think it's still just cut from the collection.
Okay, sure. Okay, sure. Since it's an average between us,
yeah,
fair enough. Now, we're not skipping over the 2007 animated, the CGI movie. That is one we're going to do later in the year when the new animated movie's coming out. That'll be kind of go with that as a sort of back-to-back week thing. But yeah, so we're going to the next live-action movie though, which was,
oh boy,
yeah. So Megan Fox, all that stuff. I've only ever seen the first like 10 minutes of it, maybe 15 minutes. So
I've seen whatever was included in the trailers.
That's fair. Will Arnett's in it as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just looking up who the director was, because I remember being someone that I didn't like. Jonathan Liebsman. What did he do? Battle Los Angeles. Oh, no.
There you
go. Darkness Falls. I gave that movie a 2 out of 10. Right?
Oof.
Oh god, this guy's a hack. This is
Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning.
Oh, that movie's dreadful as well. I give that like a 3 out of 10. Oh.
Well, it's okay. Most recently, he directed 4 episodes of the Halo TV show, which was always critically renowned.
Oh yeah, people love that thing. Oh yeah, this guy's an absolute like. Michael Bay would be better. Like Michael Bay directing it would not be good. I wouldn't like it probably, but it would be better than Jonathan Leesman. Leesman's a complete absolute turd producer.
I'm just checking.
He makes turds.
Well, he's only on for the one. We have a different person directing the sequel. So.
Maybe the second one's better. I don't know. He did Darkness Falls, Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the Beginning, Battle Los Angeles, Wrath of the Titans, which I've not seen, but I've heard it was even worse than the first one.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Oh god, this guy's track record is
the sequel to Ring. He did Rings.
No, that's not that.
That's not that.
No, because Rings came out in like 2018 or something like that.
Oh, okay. No, it says Samara Morgan's. I think it was a different. It's a short. Sorry, it was a 15-minute long short.
Yeah, because there was Ring, the Ring 2, and then Rings, which is the third one, didn't come out until like 2018. So
what we're looking at here is he's directed 10 things, and you don't like about like half of them.
I've either there's 3 of them that I've seen and hate. Is it 3? Darkness Falls, Texas Chainsaw Beginning. No, I've not seen that. I just know its reputation. So I've seen 2 and think they're absolute garbage, and
the rest have bad reputations.
Have very bad reputations. And in particular, Wrath of the Titans, I saw Clash of the Titans and thought it was trash, and I heard people say that was worse. So
yeah.
I'm not expecting good things next week. That's all I'm saying.
Cowabunga, dude.
This is oh no. Oh god, guys, come on. Well, we'll see you for the 2014 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles next time. Let us know what you thought of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 in the comments below, or on Twitter at Screams Midnight, or of course you can get in touch in a variety of ways. Email mftvquestions@gmail.com. I never bring that up anymore. I always forget to bring that up.
No, you don't. What?
But you could access that if you like. But of course, you can support all the content by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and getting bonuses for your trouble. The first tier has a bonus episode. At the $3 tier, you get a movie that ties into the theme. This month, we did the Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated movie. And at the $5 tier, you get the second bonus, which is the Extra Reels bonus, which is us doing some really goofy B-movie. We did Miami Connection for this month.
January.
Or for last month, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
This month, we did Deadly Prey.
Yes.
Which we've not recorded yet, but I know it'll be out maybe by
it's either great or awful, or both.
We don't know yet, but check that out. And alternatively, you can get those at different tiers on the YouTube members as well as an alternative if you want to. But you can support us that way. You can support us for free by liking, subscribing, rating the podcast on your audio podcast app of choice. Most people use iTunes, but whatever you use, give us a good rating. Share us out amongst people. And lastly, I'll just thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Sandy Palacios, not that one, Board Now, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Al Treisman. So thank you very much.
The secret is it's me. I have to pay to be here.
That's not true. But there's another David. I could have just switched to the other David, but I wasn't thinking quick enough.
You could have, yeah.
I wasn't thinking quick enough. That's, whatever. David asked not to be thanked on this show, specifically.
I just thought it would be weird that you're thanking me while I'm here.
It's weird, yes. The actuality is he's at a higher tier that makes Connor read a comic book on the Comic Book Podcast, which is just... So he likes torturing Connor is the real...
I've been doing it for the better part of like a decade now. I don't see myself stopping.
Very, very, very good. Very good point. Anyway, that is us. That is the show. Thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies. And, well, you used the Addams Family line, so I can't use that.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Frisbee also good.